Now, welcome back. It's time we continue with this conversation on the missing children here in Kenya. But before we do, we were talking about the police. Let's listen to what police spokesperson Mr. Mushiri had to say in regards to the same.
We really don't have a surge, as you've put it. It's only that we have a public that is more conscious, much more aware, and then we have the spread of information is actually much more faster. So, and then something else that we've also noticed during our analysis, that we have also the intrusion of AI and fakes. Because you realize that some of the clips, for instance, that we've seen in recent times, you find that this is something that is recycled, that had been seen at some other point. So it would place the country at such a point where we suddenly start realizing or thinking that there's a surge, that we have an emergency of these cases. That is not the case at all.
Well, that was a police spokesperson, Mr. Mushiri, in an interview with a local TV station. Honorable Millie, I don't know how you'd react to his sentiments.
That is really expected. I want to tell you that I actually started work. I took actually the pioneering work on the issue of trafficking against children in this country. And it was informed by the cases that were being reported to us at the Cradle at that time. And when we raised the alarm, we were told then by the police that that's just a way of trying to get money from donors. There's nothing like trafficking. We just say high-sounding words. But now you can actually see the government itself is actually indicating the number of children that are trafficked. And that's why I actually brought the law on trafficking against children. So I would want to say that, yes, we are living in an era where there may be fakes or deep fakes, but that doesn't diminish the fact that we're actually having a very, very serious issue of, missing children, abducted children, children who are killed, And I think what we need to do is actually deal with those cases as seriously as they appear. Because every single day there's a case of a child who is, reported missing, reported stolen. And to date, we actually have parents who are going online on their own. Some are covered by news, saying they are looking for their children who have disappeared for a long time. The other day, we saw a 15-year-old girl who was arrested stealing a small child. I have no clue why, a 15-year-old would be involved in such a thing. So it's actually, I don't think it's actually proper for the officer to try and blame it on, AI and all that. AI may be there, but it's fairly limited. We have a very serious issue, even from the statistics that we have been given from the Children's Department, and even from other organizations that were talking about it yesterday. Yeah.
You've alluded to a case, and that 15-year-old girl said she was promised a mobile phone by an individual if she was able, she could bring a child to the guy, and that raises other concerns. But let's talk about, probably the gaps and the laws. You've been advocating for, the welfare of children and women. You've also been a vocal, person in the National Assembly, legislator for that matter, in regards to laws that protect the welfare of children. From your assessment, are there possibly gaps that needs to be, addressed, or what is the issue here? Are we looking at or staring at an issue of, we're not implementing the laws that we have, or are there gaps that we can also look into?
Well, I'll tell you very confidently that the gaps are not quite in the law. When I was in civil society, we used to talk about gaps in the law, and that's actually part of the reason I went to Parliament, because I think I like the president of Botswana, who says he's a doer, and I'm a doer like him. When I see there's a gap, I fit in. I come in and I sort it out. So when I was in civil society and we kept talking about gaps in the law, I said, why don't I go to Parliament and fix it? So if you actually look at my record, I've actually brought in a lot of laws relating to children, including the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act, the Victim Protection Act, amongst many others. And so if you actually look at the issue of the law, we have very, very good laws. There might be minor, gaps here and there, but nothing really major. The problem is the implementation of those laws. And it's a bit frustrating. And I was understanding the Botswanan president when he was telling his officers that sometimes I get frustrated. Perhaps our president gets frustrated. I don't know. I've not heard him saying. But sometimes you get frustrated when you've done the bit that you need to do. Like from the legislative part, we have brought the laws. We have enacted the laws. So the challenge that we are facing then is after we've enacted the laws, why are they not being implemented? We have the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act. There's even a fund for that act. Why is it not being implemented? The Victim Protection Act is there. The fund actually has not actually been activated. So perhaps that is what we need to do as Parliament to give it money. But we also have even other laws that have been there before the Penal Code, amongst many others. So the laws is not actually the problem. The problem is the implementation. And in terms of implementation, I would actually say in investigations, there's a very big gap in investigations. There's a very big gap in prosecutions. And then I think there's also a missing gap in when you go to the judiciary, that sometimes some of the cases take too long. And when the cases take too long, people forget, and impunity sets in. That there are people, like for instance, I'd give another example, that you can see copycat crimes. And the copycat crimes usually come in when there's impunity. That I go, for instance, and throw acid on the face of a woman, and I do not see any punishment meted out against a person who threw, acid on the face of another woman. So then I feel like I'm like, what will happen to me? Or the worst that will happen to me is I'll be put in 2 months, and then I bribe my way and get back into the society. So we actually have a very broken system in terms of implementation. And that's what we need to fix, that broken system in implementation.
Okay, you've talked about investigations and also prosecution and alluded to the issue of judiciary. From where you sit, can we probably set up courts that can deal decisively and just with the issue of missing children, with the issue of femicide maybe? Will that probably enhance the implementation and ensure that we curb these issues once and for all from where you sit?
I think the courts actually, we have specialized courts now. Of course, they are not all over the country, but there are specialized courts even dealing, before we didn't even have courts for children. So now we have actually specialized courts dealing with children's issues. And because we have those specialized courts, now we can actually have some of the cases of children move very quickly. But the challenge that we face, I think, in the judiciary, again, it's the issue of competing demands, yeah? And I'll give an example that recently we were discussing. I don't want to say in what WhatsApp group, but there's a WhatsApp group where we're discussing a situation where people were saying there are many, they went to visited some of the prisons and discovered that there are very many young people who are in there, not just young people, but many people are in there because they had raped or defiled children. And they were saying, our prisons are teeming in with people who are falsely accused for rape. By the time somebody is convicted, our standards in criminal justice is beyond reasonable doubt, yeah? But it just shows our mind frame that we don't take certain crimes seriously. When somebody tells you that somebody who rapes, a child who is 1 month old should be given moratorium by the government, should be released by the government, it basically means that even for missing children, we don't think it's a serious issue. Before we amended the law, I can tell you that you would be convicted for life, actually used to be hanged. The sentence was hanging. If you threaten somebody with a knife, while you're stealing from somebody, you threaten them, with a knife. But if somebody, for instance, raped a little 3-year-old child until they lost their uterus, then the magistrate had a chance to decide whether to give them whether to give them sentences and whatever sentences, yeah, so that they are not confined, yeah. Really, it just shows our mind frame that we don't take issues against children very seriously, whether it is issues of missing children, and a lot of times, as I said earlier on, when children are missing, it's because they're being used for ritual purposes. they are being used for sexual abuse or for labor, or for, in few instances, then there are people who don't have children.
There's also the issue of organ trafficking.
Organ trafficking, yes. So that is also there, which is actually part of trafficking in children. So, you know, but we don't take issues like that seriously. We take property more seriously than we take life. And that's a problem I have for us in this country, that we pride property above human life. I've never understood that.
Okay, but just briefly, again, on the issue of, enforcing, because you've talked about the implementation and the laws being there, but the issue being implementation. Now, we can lament as much as we want, but what can we do to ensure that these laws are fully or properly enforced? Because at the end of the day, if they cannot be enforced, then we cannot. We cannot solve this issue.
It's quite a challenge. The reason why I'm telling you it's quite a challenge, as Parliament, our role is legislative representation and oversight. So as part of our representation, we actually ask questions, we bring motions, and part of our legislative role, we have enacted those laws. We even amended, actually not even amended, we overhauled the Children Act, and now we're actually in the process of amending the Sexual Offences Act, to give stronger, protection for children. But the challenge that we are facing now is when it comes to our oversight, that there's only so much we can do in relation to oversight. When the police are not doing their work, there's only so much I can do in relation to that. So the ball, goes back to the court of the executive, which is a presidency, that there needs to be something that needs to be done. And I think there must be consequences for officers who don't take their work seriously. And I think that is actually our missing link. We take things too casually, too light, whether it's from the point of, as I indicated, from investigation to prosecution, we take issues a bit too lightly, yeah.
Fair enough. When you talk about, the presidency taking this issue seriously and holding even the police accountable, Kenyans would be left wondering if that can really happen, because the same government, from the president even to the interior boss, are on record saying that, if police, for example, shoot protesters, be it in the leg or anywhere, then the government will come to their defense. So can Kenyans really look at the executive and the presidency and say they can be able to ensure that even the police are held accountable?
I think there's always a road to Damascus moment. So the government can have a road to Damascus. And I think they did indeed have a road to Damascus. And if you remember, the CS for Interior apologized and said that he was quoted out of context. Whether that was true or not, I don't know, but he actually said that that was wrong. So I'd want to take him at his word, that the government can actually, take those issues more seriously than. But right now, I don't think we are doing as much as we should be doing in protecting our children, especially from the executive end. We are not doing as much. We have the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. I would want to say, in terms of good work, I would put legislature number 1, judiciary number 2, executive number 3, in that order. And I'm not just saying because I happen to be a member of parliament, but I can actually, if you challenge us, I've told you, the laws that we pass, tell me which law you want us to enact that we have not enacted in almost every aspect dealing with children, including children who are being groomed in cyber crime. We changed the Cyber Crime Act to protect children in the internet space. Whatever space that you look around child protection, we have dealt with the law. So there's so much wiggle room that we can do, as members of parliament in terms of our role. Yeah.
Fair enough. When you talk about, online predators and online grooming and all, before you talk about even the DC and how they're equipped to handle these issues, let's talk about the funding, because I was looking at the statistics, and in the 2025-26 budget, the State Department for Children and Welfare Services, got a budget of, under recurrent, they got 11.3 and development 144. That takes the total figure allocation to 11.5 billion. Is this enough to be able to cater for everything that is needed, be it, setting up offices across, 47 counties, having adequate personnel in terms of officers who can track these cases at the lowest level. Is it enough? Or
no, it is not enough. I think the Children's Department has always raised that concern with us. They've, before I was in the Budget Committee, and they appeared before the Budget Committee severally, indicating that the money is not sufficient. And I was a very strong advocate for increased allocation for women and for children and for persons with disability. But I think we need to relook at our, budgeting process. And because I have actually been in the budget process, I think we can do our budget better. I think we can, there are things we give priorities that we don't necessarily have to give priority. When we have our children, and I'd said it before, it has to do with our mind frame about what we consider more important. Do we consider our children more important? Do we need to protect our children as opposed to other things that we give, priority? And I think that's where we need to change our mindset. Do we need to put in more money in protecting women? There's too many cases of women being killed. We need to put in more money in protecting our children. A lot of children are getting lost. The ones who are not getting lost are being abused. So we need to put in a lot more money in protecting our women, in protecting our children. But instead, we are putting in a lot more money in areas that are not necessarily, they're important, but they are not as important. If we look at the NSAR matrix, I think it would help us. We look at the things that are urgent and important, and not, sometimes we actually put in money on things that are urgent but not important. We need to put in things that are important and urgent. And protecting children and women is important and urgent.
Fair enough. I want to digress a little bit because you've talked about the issue of women being killed and the issue of femicide. The president had formed the GBV task force,
yes,
and they presented a report to him.
Yeah, the one that was led by Commissioner, former CJ Nancy Baraza.
Yes, exactly, Deputy CJ, yes, for that matter.
Yeah.
But there are concerns, and even lobby groups are talking about failure by the Ministry of Gender, led by the Cabinet Secretary Anna Wendot, to implement, because they were to submit, I believe, a memorandum to the cabinet to be able to implement the task force, the report rather, from the task force. But that has not happened. The 30-day period that the president gave already lapsed, but that has not happened. Does that further highlight how seriously we address these issues? Exactly.
Because at the point where the president actually set up this task force, the cases of femicide were pretty high. And not only did the president set up that task force, but he actually also gave about 100 million for women members of parliament, to raise the issues of concern in their constituencies. I remember holding a very big meeting in my constituency, and we had a very, very robust discussion about the possible reasons. And, people, like how, some of the things that you don't imagine, like people don't even know their way out. Like, I want to leave this marriage, and they don't think they have any options. So that was there. But because it was an emergency that time, we dealt with it as an emergency. It was urgent. That's what I'm talking about, having, going to the matrix and looking at the urgent, but not important. But this is a case of urgent and important. It should be priority number one. Protecting our women should be urgent and important. Protecting our children should be urgent and important. And it should be reflected in the budget. Like right now, I know the budget committee is meeting right now, and they are preparing their budget. Look at it, in fact, you've given the figures, but look at it as a percentage of the overall budget. It's usually peanuts. So even we sometimes may complain and say, oh, the CS gender is not doing her work. But short of asking her to perform miracles, what would she be doing with peanuts? She can't do much without, a resource envelope. She needs money to do a lot of, one, creating awareness, telling people they have options, providing alternatives for women who have to leave their homes. Because sometimes a woman needs to leave, but they leave and they have nowhere else, to go. And in situations where we have children who are lost and they need to be traced and to be traced urgently, Do our police have, you know, what they need, the technology that they need? Can they move in very quickly? But over and above that, of course, as I said, we need a mental paradigm shift to treat these issues as urgent issues. The way we'll treat a terrorist attack. Why do we treat a terrorist attack as a serious issue? Because life is lost. But we are talking here about children in thousands getting lost. That's life loss. It's almost like a terrorist attack. Why aren't we seeing it in that light?
Okay, you've talked about this issue of funding, and it seems it is a big concern because the funds provided are not enough to tackle this issue and other emerging issues within the sector in general. But one would wonder, of course you've said and alluded to the legislature doing its bit, but when it comes to appropriating these funds, I mean, it comes from the National Assembly, the appropriation of this money.
Excuse the... If you know how the budget is done, the ministries actually come with budgets. But
Yes.
first of all, there is a ceiling that is set
Okay.
before. And when the ceiling is set, it's set by the executive. So it means that gender, when you are doing, you are told this is the farthest that you can go. So when it comes to Parliament, Parliament can intervene, but can only intervene so much. We cannot make the budget from the get-go. We don't actually make the budget, as you know, sometimes we say, but we can intervene in the budget making process. So the problem actually starts from outside, and it actually starts from where the budget cap is set. So when you're talking about setting them, I actually want to bring an amendment on the PFM Act, and I want to bring an amendment to set a percentage of money for women and for children. I know I'll be told it's you know, a money bill, and then I need approval from the CS Treasury, which I will take. But we need to actually put a cap for issues to do with the protection of women and children.
Fair enough. Even as we address all these issues, Honorable Millie, the blame falls on the parents sometimes, because some people come out and say your child got lost because you're not keen enough. There are cases where, you know, the government, rather parents, have left children with their relatives, but at the end of the day, they're still molested and even killed by their loved ones. But even apart from that, there's also the issue of how we treat children. And you've said members of parliament have done their bit. But when it comes to even sentiments, we've seen some of your colleagues for that case in recent weeks, and I'll be specific. The Honorable Senator Karen was on the spot in regards to, you know, what some argued, and I'll say it, you know, plainly, was sexualizing a minor. That also, you know, sends the wrong message. If a leader of Karen caliber can say or give such sentiments, then it makes the issue worse, if I'm not wrong.
Well, it's true. When it comes from us, not just as legislators, but especially a woman legislator, it's a bit disappointing. The way I took it is that Karen wanted to crack a joke, but it went bad. But either way, it is still not excusable, because we are sending a wrong message. You can imagine what that girl feels or what the parent feels. So yes, sometimes, so, you know, as members of parliament or as people in leadership, we need to be very careful when we talk. Because whatever we say is taken very, very seriously and affects, you know, the society. So yes, as members of parliament, we need to be careful about what we do or what we say.
Okay, fair enough. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, you know, we talked about funding, but also, for example, on matters online grooming and online predators, one would wonder if, you know, our investigative agencies are well equipped. Does, you know, the DCI have, you know, up-to-date digital tools that can, you know, track these online predators? Because if you look at what Kenyans are saying, and that is some of what the issues that they raised even when we said we're hosting you this evening to talk about this issue, is that when it comes to cracking the whip on dissenters, on government dissenters, the government and the, you know, the investigative agencies, be it DCI, can track Kenyans to where they are, even if it's just, you know, from a tweet. But when it comes to crucial issues like, online predators who are, grooming children, it becomes an issue. Is it that we don't have the equipments, or is it that we are focusing on, again, issues that
back to what I was actually telling you.
So what can we do about that?
That there's something about our mind frame, and that's why I'm saying I don't know what else we need to do, because we have worked with the police for a long time, even in training for, a different mindset and a different mind frame for our police. But what we focus on, like what I was saying, we tend to chase squirrels. Really, for me, there are things that actually, unless somebody, says something that actually can create, ethnic division or ethnic fights, something that actually does incite people, I don't think we should spend a lot of energy. Some of these things that the young people say are neither here nor there. If you don't like what they say, block them. Really, there are some things that you just need to block somebody. You don't need to send the DCI on them or respond to them or ignore them, really. But I think we spend too much time and money on squirrels when we have serious issues. And the squirrels, the serious issues are our lost children, our women who are being, killed left, right, and center. Every single day there's a woman who is being killed. Every single day there's a woman who has acid thrown on their face. And I want to agree with you that if DCI could put in as much effort as they put on, the way they look for young people who their only fault is being young. Even us, when we are when we were young, we suffered the challenge of youthfulness. When you are young, you are very opinionated, and you think your opinion is the only one that matters, and you're still evolving. And I think we need to give some people, young people, a bit of leeway and focus on real criminal issues. Okay, we have at least, if I'm not wrong, the figures that I read this afternoon, around 44,000 children in government, safety houses. Now, let's talk about even DNA repositories. Do we have a proper national database that can help in, easing the process of reunification of children and their families? No, we don't. That I know as a fact, that we don't have actually a proper system. And the reason I know that is that there was one time where we're actually looking for somebody who had died. And we were being told in Kenyatta that they do mass disposal of bodies because they can't trace. And I'm like, why don't you do DNA? They said, which DNA? So I think Kenya, we need to invest a lot more. If we invested in DNA testing and banking, then it means even when we have children who are lost, then it might be easier to trace them. But the challenge we have, as I've said here, is that our priorities are a bit skewed. We need to, and not even just that, the same technology that we are talking about, if the government invested in technology, in tracing young people, just using the same technology, then a child who disappears in the morning would be found pretty quickly. And I want to say I'm very happy when I listened to the CS Gender and the PS for Children. And they actually said that they have, they've reduced the time when people need to report, because before, if a child was lost, you take 24 hours. They said now if a child is lost, report immediately. Because for a child, let's say it's a child of 10 months or whatever, that short period makes a whole difference. I remember, of course, there are some cases where children get lost innocently. Like I think 2 years ago, my housekeeper lost the son. And it just happened that he was with the father walking in town, and he pulled away from the father. And I can tell you for the next 2 hours, even I put his face on social media. And I can tell you within a short time, people were giving us feedback. And we found him. And we found him right at the place where they stay, which is not very close to where I stay. And how did they find him? Because when now people were asking him, who are you? Where are you going? And some people had seen him on social media. very quickly. I remember I have a nephew who is sick, yeah, and he got lost. He's an adult, but he's sick. He has mental health challenges. And one time I actually posted when he was lost. And somebody just said, oh, I think I saw this guy was posted by Honorable Millie. And called, the number put there, and he was found and taken back home. But now imagine if you have a government that has a system that works that effectively. And if the government had a system that, say, connects with people like us, who have a lot of following on social media and others, and you say this is a lost child, instead of telling us about deepfake, give me the real one so that I share. You must find a way of connecting and using technology to protect our children, and that's a challenge that we are facing.
Okay, from the DNA National Database, I mean, let's talk about the Child Protection Information Management System. From where I don't know whether you're privy to this and whether there's, real-time data synchronization countrywide when it comes to, tracking and all.
Well, I think the Children's Department has tried, but with the challenges that they are facing, it's not at where it should be. And you'll discover that there are even many children, because of those lapses and gaps, that they are lost, but the Children's Department don't even have that information. And then, of course, even from what you would listen to the Children's Department, they were saying that even when they have that information, sometimes that information does not even reach the police. So their data is very different. Because there will be a child who is lost, like, for instance, the case, of my house manager. The child is lost, yeah? But they are found before they reach, the police, before we, even though in his case we even actually reported to the police within the shortest time. But what about a case where you don't report, yeah? And in that case, then that information will not be there. So we'll not actually be dealing with the real figures. So the numbers probably are much higher. A child who disappears in my constituency, for instance, probably has not reached the national database, yeah? So I think what we need to do is to enhance the support to the ministry so that they are more effective in handling. I think the two women who are, both the PS and the CS are doing an amazing job, but with limited resources.
Okay, even as we conclude this conversation, you've talked about information, and sometimes there are concerns because even the departments, mandated departments, sometimes this information is not forthcoming, even on missing children in terms of data and statistics. Many Kenyans depend on, NGOs to get data in regards to how many children have disappeared this month, how many children have, been trafficked. So how can we ensure that these departments, and even the police, be it the DCI, be it the police, be it the State Department come out, probably publish, should we say, quarterly data in terms of missing children, so that we can be able to even keep track?
I agree with you that it's actually the government agencies, much less the NGOs, that should be doing that work. I remember when I was in the cradle, it's our data that was being relied on because we dealt with a lot of cases of child sexual abuse. And perhaps now they probably have the same, it's just that they don't, advertise it. And what then would happen is that based on the data that we are getting, you could actually make, informed decisions. One, in terms of prevalence, we knew where most cases of abuse were. We could get, who the vulnerable child was. We could know who the predator, the profile of a predator. And that is information that you can actually get by, keeping that data from government sources. But the other thing is, why do the public trust NGOs much more than they, trust the government? But it's because of those gaps. So I think what we need to do is enhance our services as the government so that government entities are trusted much more than NGOs are trusted. In a fairly well-working system, there is no need for NGOs, to tell you the truth. In an effective and well-working system, what would the NGOs be doing? Or they'll be doing very limited work because the government will be doing all their work. So I think what we need to do, one, enhance the resources for those government entities, but beyond that, hold individual officers to account. where they fail to do their work. Because people think they can get away with doing nothing. I was talking very recently to a niece of mine who is a nurse, and she was just getting shocked because she's still young and she's just finishing. And she was like, I go to the hospital, and the way I see, you know, the senior nurses handling people, she gets shocked. And I was telling her, don't ever reach a point where you normalize what they normalize. And she was giving me a case of a guy who was asking and asking and asking until he died. And he was asking for something very simple, that all it required was somebody to go from 10th floor to the lower floor to get that information to save their life. But we have become so callous as human beings. I don't know what has happened to us. We don't feel, we have no empathy. There's something that has died in us as human beings, in Kenya especially. And I don't know why, whether it's too much suffering. I know we are suffering a lot as you know, Kenyans are going through so much. But we shouldn't go through so much that it takes away our sense of humanity. Whether you are a nurse, whether you are a child protection officer, whether you are a police officer, or whether you are a member of parliament. I think work as unto the Lord. When you are working, work as unto the Lord. Don't work as though you are working for a human being. Yeah.
Fair enough. There's one other concern. There's the issue, and it's not just with you know, child molesters, also on other, you know, criminal cases here in the country, where if it involves a relative, like I mentioned, if a relative was left with a kid and then they molest the kid and probably kill or murder the child rather, the family decides that they will do an out-of-court settlement, and some argue that that is one of the issues that you know, deters, you know, ensuring that justice is served. So can we do something about that?
Well, under the law, we actually have outlawed it. You cannot negotiate in a case where a child is sexually violated. There is no out-of-court or ADR over cases of abuse. However, people still do it under the table and with police officers, which is really a tragedy, that you find that somebody is compromised and they pay money. You don't know what you are doing to the life of this child. I remember there was a case we handled at the cradle where it was a little girl of, I think she was 3 years old. And she had lost most of her, you know, reproductive organs at that age. But you, the father, you are trying to negotiate with the perpetrator. What are you doing for the life of that child? So that is why actually under the law we said we cannot allow such things. I think that's why, for me, I'm saying we should reach a point where now we should sue officers, and not just for criminal culpability, but even in civil also, that, you know, you feel it where it pinches. Ulipe pesa. Like I've seen the governor for, is it for Narok or where, who has come forward and I think is complaining that the one of the people who are campaigning against him took a young man to court, and the court ordered 16 million, and they now want to fundraise and pay that. I don't know the circumstances of that case, but imagine if we were to do that to people who are, you know, settling out, whether you're a police officer, and you are forced to pay 10 million out of your pocket. The next person will be very careful when they start negotiating.
Okay, you've talked about, you know, we can only do too much, and wondering what more can be done to sort out these cases. There are a lot of families, mothers who are watching today and their children are missing. Where can they turn to, Honorable Millie? If the systems are not working, there's a breakdown in regards to implementing these laws that we've enacted, where can they turn to?
I'll tell them not to give up. And the reason I'll tell them not to give up is that sometimes you might lose a child, but you discover that there are children who will show up 10, 15, 20, 30 years later. Of course, by that time, the life of a child is completely affected. Maybe this is a family that was able to check the child to school, but this is a situation where they are made to, you know, do labor and have not gone to school. So you may have actually affected the life of this child forever. But I would want to tell them, don't give up, persist, keep knocking, while we're actually doing our bit, and we are hoping that at some point, our persistence and your persistence will make a difference.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for, of course, gracing this particular show and enlightening the masses and, just highlighting what Parliament has done and what needs to be done to ensure that we sort out these cases once and for all. Just to be fair, I'll give you 20 seconds to give us your parting shot.
Well, my parting shot is that I'd want to encourage every single Kenyan that this is our responsibility. It's our joint responsibility. Do your part as an individual. Don't just look at us as legislators or as the police officer. Wherever you find yourself with a responsibility, do something. If you see somebody doing something wrong, report it. Take action if you can. Because there's also a way in which people have also, taken off, hands-off approach. Just take action as an individual.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that was a conversation here in regards to the issue of missing children amid rising concerns in regards to what the government can do and what needs to be done by the involved stakeholders to just ensure that we sort out this issue once and for all. Now, just to